of China's biggest issues right now is the aging population and the aging workforce. The numbers of the older generations are much higher than the younger generations, which is causing a problem for their workforce, as I said. One of the main reasons for this is the one-child policy. You may have heard in the news that they're working on amending this. However, they are encountering a lot of red tape at the moment. In order to prove that the urban families can have more than 2 children, the father has to prove that he's an only child. A certificate system that hasn't even been put in place yet. So they're having to make a new system, get that going. A little bit of a process, but it's showing potential. Also, the rural areas have been allowed these exceptions for years. As long as the first child was not a male, the family was allowed to have a second child. And it hasn't really showed any improvement. So skeptics say if it hasn't showed any improvement in rural areas, what does it say it will show improvement in the urban areas? But it does have a potential, and they are working on things at the moment. The agriculture industry is being affected by rapid urbanization, which is due to the access to health care. This isn't access to health care insurance, mind you. This is just access to the facilities and the doctors that are available in the cities. The jobs that are in the cities, the kind of jobs that you would normally get pension, health care, those sort of things, you can't get those if you're a rural-born citizen because of the laws that are put in place. So they're just moving there for the facilities themselves. That's very important to remember. So all these rural immigrants that are moving to the urban areas are causing the overcrowded cities, which is why they were building so many buildings, as TJ was telling you. But at the same time, they were building so much, they weren't even keeping up with the population. It was kind of overload. And next, I will hand you to Osa, and he's going to tell you more about our military and education.
I'm Osa Gaius, and we'll talk quickly about China's military as well as the education sector. So when doing our research, we're sort of important to talk about the military, because I think when we all in this room think about the question, is China a threat? The question we all think about is China's military going to be a threat? Is China's policies and their activities in the South China Sea going to be a problem? Are they going to draw the U.S. into a conflict? So we looked at China's military, and as you know, China's military is the largest manpower force in the world. And their current modernization effort means that by 2015, they will outpace the United States in terms of military spending every year. This means that they will have a larger budget than not only the United States, but also Russia and other large countries like that. However, we found several problems despite the scale of the Chinese military, which is that although the threat may seem looming, China lacks 2 things. One, they lack strong ties. In other words, China has no friends. The multiple conflicts they have in the South China Sea, as well as in Asia, are emblematic of the fact that China does not have the strong connections similar to NATO or the European Union, or even America's connections here in North America, to have a large-scale conflict. Second of all is we realize that China lacks true strength, right? And what we mean here is, in context of spending on the military, China has spent a great deal amount of money. How many aircraft carriers do they have? 1. How many aircraft carriers do we have? 10. So this scale problem is interesting for China, because even if they wanted to fight an all-out complete war, they could not move their troops from China to the United States, right? So I think that the threat inflation that we encounter is something we need to reconsider. So now let's talk about China's education sector, because that's obviously a question we must answer. China has strength, and China is a threat in the sense that it has ubiquitous primary education. So if you're a child from age 1 to about 12, you have to go to school and you have to learn. However, something happens when you enter the tertiary sector as the graduate level and upward, which is that China lacks a strong postgraduate education sector. In other words, there aren't enough schools, there are not enough opportunities for people who want to continue education to do that, right? And this is going to be important as China attempts to compete on the global scale. A second problem that China encounters, which hurts the ability to be a threat on the global stage, is brain drain. In other words, why are there so many Chinese students in the United States? It is because there isn't the capacity and the infrastructure in China for them to achieve what they need to achieve, which means that China is losing a large population of its brightest and smartest, and this again hurts its ability to be a threat on the global stage. Now, Scott will tell you about the rigorous analysis that we did to come to these conclusions and make recommendations for China going forward.
Hello, my name is Scott Craig. I am the analyst behind our statistical analysis. Let's start with a broad overview. In order to understand where a country is in development. We need to not only compare the country to itself, we need to compare it to other nations as well. In order to do this, we used numbers and we based our study on the World Economic Forum's Global Competitive Index, or GCI for short. Using this basis, we ran GDP as our dependent variable, and as our independent variables, we had factors such as institutions or health and education. Model 1 incorporates all nations in all stages of development. In this stage, we found that technology and infrastructure greatly affected the growth of a nation. They were highly significant. However, when we go down to a more focused look on the third stage, which is where the United States or the United Kingdom are, we see that this is no longer the primary factor. The primary factor here is labor market efficiency. Are we compensating our workers properly? Are they producing efficiently? The next stage, or the next stage that China needs to worry about, is that of the transition. This is a stage they must get through in order to enter stage 3. However, the problem is, with transitions, there's always chaos. Every change brings chaos. So there is no significant factor for this stage. But we can look instead at what China can do right now to improve its stuff. They can focus instead on their healthcare and education, which was the most significant factor for stage 2. But let's take a more detailed look, which is what this is, for stage 3. So we can see what they should focus on more specifically than just labor market efficiency. What should they worry about? Here we see that the most significant factors are wage determination, pay and productivity, and brain drain. In other words, countries that are in the highest stage of development need to focus on compensating their employees for their abilities and having employees that are capable of producing. Otherwise, their employees that are capable will find the pay that they are worth. Let's look closer at stage 2 with the next chart. The health and education factors. This is what they need to focus on right now. This is what they need to improve right now. All countries in this stage need to worry about these things. The highest, most significant factor for this stage is that of internet access in schools. If you cannot train your employees to compete in a modern world, they will not succeed in the modern world. The second most important factor here is the business impact of malaria. Like I said, this affects all nations in this stage, and it has decimated economies. However, there are 2 additional factors that we need to look at. Those of math and science education and the quality and the attendance, same factor, of management schools. Are we training tomorrow's leaders properly? Using this broad overview and then focusing more on these individual factors, we can not only see what China needs to improve on generally, but we can also see what they need to improve on specifically. It also allows us to watch and wait and see when China starts improving itself.
So, we end as we began with this fundamental question. Is China a threat? It's the question looming in the backs of all Americans who are thinking, should we even go to college, or we're going to lose our jobs to China? But I think this is a misguided question, because there is no simple answer to this question if that's what you were hoping it would give you. On one hand, yes, China is a threat. Their economy is growing. Their labor market is gaining efficiency. However, in many senses, no, because they're outspending on their military as opposed to the education sector, healthcare, infrastructure, and these important things that will make the difference, as our analysis shows, from the current stage, where they're sort of the world's manufacturer, to becoming a great nation like the United States, Britain, etc. So we think, and in all, China must choose. They must stop focusing on bombs, and instead on books and the building of the necessary infrastructure to become a player on the global stage, and to be not just a threat in the military sense, but a threat in the larger sense, which is a threat in the competitive, economic, as well as competitive social sense. And And we think these are the things that China must do, and these are recommendations we make. Thank you for listening.